Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Griddle podcast. Check out our website for waiver wire ads, rest of season rankings, and more on fantasygriddle.com. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Griddle and that you've liked our Facebook page as well. I'm your host, Mike P-Tash. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duncan Murphy. Duncan, what's on the griddle for tonight?
Tonight on the griddle, we have a very special interview with Eric McClung of playerprofiler.com. We're also going to get into a little bit of a preview of the Thursday night matchup between the Jets and the Cleveland Browns.
All right, tonight we have a very special guest joining us on the Fantasy Griddle podcast. His name is Eric McClung. He is host of RotoUnderworld's Game Night on Friday nights at 9 p.m. on RotoGrinders. He's also a contributor on NumberFire and Yahoo Fantasy. He's also the editor-in-chief of the world-famous PlayerProfiler.com's Draft Kit. You can follow him at Eric McClung on Twitter. Eric, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Fantasy Griddle. I like the name. You know, if you're having your pancakes, your waffles, whatever the case may be, off the griddle, much, much better than just, you know, the regular frying pan. So love the name, love the griddle. Let's get at it.
Yeah, I've been following you on Twitter for a couple of years now through Player Profiler, and you've always been great about giving me waiver wire tips through Twitter. So definitely happy to have you on the show tonight.
Yeah, no problem. I'll take the unlike Matt Kelly, I will take the occasional start sit type question. So I know you're supposed to manage your own damn team, but you know, I'm not in that stratosphere with Matt Kelly. My mentions don't blow up all that much, so I'll field your questions, you know, on occasion.
Well, you know, we're through week 2 here. How's the season going so far?
Well, I mean, for my fantasy team is pretty good. My home league, I'm 2-0. I like that. I'm pretty much 1-1 just about everywhere else. So, you know, things could be better, but you know, it's just great having football back. You know, Patrick Mahomes just lighting the world on fire is pretty cool to see. I loved him as a prospect coming out. So, yeah, it's just cool to have the game back, and you know, we'll see. I've been a 49er fan for a long time, so it's been a little bumpy, but you know, we got Garoppolo in there. That looks good. R.I.P. Jarek McKinnon. That stinks, but you know, Breida broke out in a big way here in week 2, so onward and upward, hopefully.
Thank goodness. We were worried that you were going to be either an Eagles fan or a Steelers fan, and both of us are Pats guys, so that could have been very bad.
Yeah, I am from Pennsylvania, so yeah, I'm about an hour or so north of Philadelphia, but and I was born in New Jersey but grew up in Pennsylvania. I always kind of had that mindset of like, why do I have to like the team just because I'm from the area? Like even as a little kid, I kind of had that mindset. And no, I remember 1989. I was I don't know, 6-7 years old or whatever. My dad sat me down on the couch and we watched the 49ers against the Bears. Jim Harbaugh, coincidentally, was the quarterback for the Bears. Eventually would become the 49ers coach. But I pretty much, you know, you kind of have that mindset as a kid. I said, hey, whoever's going to win this game, this is going to be my team. And sure enough, it was those 49ers. Sure doesn't help when you watch Joe Montana and you know, Jerry Rice and eventually Steve Young and just all the phenomenal players. You can't help but you know, fall in love.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Detroit Lions fan just because I grew up watching Barry Sanders until my parents got me into the Patriots.
Barry Sanders was, I mean, that's right in my wheelhouse. That late 80s, early 90s, exactly. Man, Barry Sanders is tearing it up, and then in the playoffs, they would just, you know, if they got there, just crap the bed. So
converted from him to Drew Bledsoe.
Right. Hey, Bledsoe, he was really good. I mean, he was, you know, I mean, a lot of people remember the bridge years, you know, or how eventually he became a bridge to Romo and wasn't so hot in Dallas. But those, you know, I mean, he got New England to Super Bowl. He was good. I mean, he's a borderline Hall of Famer.
Helped lead the foundation here in New England.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so in terms of DFS lineups, I know you're big into DFS. Is there a general strategy that you have there when you're assembling your lineup?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I always try to get away from is having the mindset of like, I have to start player blah, you know, whoever that is. For example, like in week 2, you know, Alvin Kamara coming off a huge week 1, a lot of people just were like, oh, I got to play Kamara. Or, you know, maybe I'll save a little bit, go to Gurley. But I thought Melvin Gordon or Christian McCaffrey, in terms of just touch projections and just sort of, you know, points per dollar, kind of equating that, I thought just made so much more sense to save a couple $1,000s and go with those guys. So, yeah, I mean, number one, just don't ever feel like you absolutely have to play a certain guy if he's expensive. I mean, obviously in week 1, you had to play James Conner just because of the opportunity plus the price. That's an easy play. So there's cheaper, lower end guys. Yeah. I mean, Coleman was a guy in week 2. Tevin Coleman was a guy you had to play. Stuff like that. But when you get into the high end, these $9,000, $8,000 players, they take up a lot of cap, really quickly. So try to avoid, those quote unquote must plays. Quarterback is an area where I like to save if I can. Mahomes was almost an auto play for me once I saw he was only $100 more than Alex Smith on DraftKings last week. So, I like to look and defense. And a lot of people have caught on to this, especially in the last year or two. Defense almost doesn't matter. Just work your way from the bottom on up and just come up with like the most reasonable play. I like the Patriots in week 1. I like Dallas a lot here in week 3. Pretty much you just want to get some sacks, maybe some turnovers. Points allowed isn't particularly relevant. So defense is a great opportunity to save. So that's pretty much where I start. Tight end, I like to go cheap tight end. So yeah, if I can get a reasonably priced quarterback, a cheap tight end, and like a dirt cheap defense, that pretty much sets you up with a pretty good blueprint where you can go ahead and start plugging in your receivers and your backs and kind of go from there.
How do you determine which players will be low owned prior to the start of the games? Do you try to assemble your team with players that are going to be low owned, or how do you do that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. RotoGrinders has pretty good ownership projections for tournaments, but I've always had a pretty decent feel for whatever reason with kind of just figuring it out kind of on my own, I guess, who's going to be highly owned in cash games. I primarily play cash games and do pretty good with that. I haven't really, been to a big tournament or anything like that. I'm kind of so in tournaments, but primarily cash. I don't know. I just sort of just get there. I don't know. I end up just eating a lot of chalk, not really on my own. It just, I don't know. It just ends up happening that way. I do listen to a lot of podcasts and do, read articles and things like that. But early in the week, I pretty much have a pretty good beat on who's going to be owned, just taking a look at price and the opposition and just kind of figuring it out that way. I wish I had a real explanation for it, but no, it's just something that's always kind of come to me naturally in terms of cash games. Tournaments, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the wild west. I try not to get too fixated on ownership. The one thing, though, I think, especially for casual DFS players to stay away from or to avoid is, you don't have to have like the 1 or 2% owned guy to win a tournament. You can easily win or be very competitive in tournaments with guys that are 10%, 15% and above. It's just you don't have to get super cute and go with these like dirt cheap guys that are going to be barely owned and you're just hoping and praying for a touchdown or two. And that's a situation that doesn't work out. So ownership, it's definitely important, especially in tournaments. The way though that I'll try to leverage things is find a guy who I like at around the same price tag and just take my cash lineup and I'll just swap out, this receiver for another receiver. He's in a decent opportunity, or maybe he's on the road against a little bit more of a difficult matchup, whatever the case may be. And I just know the ownership isn't going to be there because the guy who's $200 more is in a way better matchup. So I'll just, make that little swap and just run that lineup in there. So I'll have a lot of chalk with just that one little change up. And usually when I do decent, when I have a good day in tournaments, usually it's like that. I kind of stay with my cash lineup and I just tinker 1 or 2 guys. Just, once you like blow it up and get real crazy, at least for me, that's when I get off the rails and things don't work out very well. Yeah.
I've been getting more and more into DFS. I did I played a decent amount last year. And something I was always, curious about is, do you ever factor in like the weather to some of your decisions? Like if you find out there's a lot of rain coming into an area and maybe the pass game isn't going to be what you thought it would be, do you ever adjust your lineup based on what the weather projections are? Or do you kind of just ignore that?
Well, the answer is that you should almost always ignore it. But no, I definitely have been guilty, especially in week 1 with the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game that, took me out of playing Antonio Brown a lot more than I would have wanted to. Roethlisberger as well, though he threw like 1 million interceptions or whatever. But generally speaking, yeah, it's really caused me more harm than good. If I just would have, never listened to anything weather related, I probably would probably would do a little bit better here and there in certain spots. But, I think really the rule of thumb is if it's sustained winds over 20 miles an hour, I want to say, I know there's somebody much smarter than I that did a really good report on that. Jonathan Bales, I believe in one of his DFS books, or I think he also wrote about it maybe years ago on like RotoWorld. That was pretty much the thing to avoid, a sustained gust of winds 20 miles an hour or more. I mean, we've seen shootouts in blizzards and, guys be, very successful in really bad snow conditions and things like that. So for the most part, yeah, it's something you're probably better off just ignoring.
So, Eric, how about for this week? Any players in particular that you're looking at?
So, if we can run through the positions here real quick. I think Cam Newton at only 6,000 on DraftKings. That's pretty much where pretty much anything I talk to you about right now is going to be DraftKings related. That's pretty much where I start and put the most of my money into is in DraftKings. So, Cam Newton at only 6,000, I think, is a really nice value. However, Patrick Mahomes is about $1,000 more, and that is just, I mean, that I mentioned him in the very beginning. He's setting the league on fire. Looks phenomenal, has all the weapons, has a great coaching, anything you want. He's going to shred the 49ers. So I think you want to find a way to pay up for him. Running back's a little tricky. I want to play Dalvin Cook, even though, he's been pretty bad running. However, the targets have definitely been there. Buffalo players are literally quitting in the middle of games on the Bills defense. So, Cook, I think he said he was cramping or whatever. He left the game last week. So I want to see kind of how that develops. But Cook is a guy that I definitely like. On the cheaper end, I think Tevin Coleman against the Saints is in play. They really didn't elevate his price a ton. Gio Bernard is underpriced, given what projections are going to spit out for his opportunity with Joe Mixon gone for a couple of weeks here. And Matt Breida from my 49ers looks really good too. He's underpriced. I don't think they took into consideration, or maybe the pricing was already out by the time he put up some pretty big numbers in week 2. So running back, I think, looks like that. Receiver, T.Y. Hilton very quietly has gotten double-digit targets in both games. I think he is significantly underpriced. Nelson Aguilar gets Carson Wentz back. He's getting double-digit targets as well. He's getting opportunities to throw the ball, to run the ball, all sorts of stuff. So I think Aguilar's in a great spot at a great price. And Sammy Watkins, I think he's like 5,100 on DraftKings. I like that price a lot. I think he is borderline cash viable. We'll see, kind of as things break throughout the week. But for that price, I like it. He's getting a decent amount of targets. They're going to be, deep balls. Again, the 49ers, not a very good defense. If he gets, I guess it doesn't matter who Richard Sherman guards. If it's Watkins or Tyreek Hill, it's going to be 6 points probably. Jared Cook, if you want to. So I want the Cook and Cook lineup here. Dalvin Cook and Jared Cook. He's pretty much been a top target for Derek Carr, who I'm not a fan of at all, but he continues to feed Jared Cook, so we'll go that route. And then the Dallas Cowboys defense is almost near the absolute bottom on the DraftKings defense salary, and we've seen Russell Wilson I feel so bad. I mean, Russell Wilson is a Hall of Fame talent, and he has like nobody around him right now. And the Cowboys, they can get to the passer, and again, it doesn't really matter, although after looking at what Chicago did, I don't think Seattle scoring a lot of points is probably in the cards either way. But even if they were looking like a decent scoring offense, I would have no problems rolling out the Dallas Cowboys defense anyway, just because I think Russell Wilson, unfortunately, is just going to get sacked, 3, 4, or 5 times, whatever the case may be. And Dallas does have some pass rushers. So, if you plug in Mahomes, the Dallas D, Jared Cook, and some of these cheaper running backs, I think it's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, that game last night was absolutely brutal. He was getting just beat up all night long, running for his life. Looks pretty bad over there. I have Russell Wilson on a team, and I've been trying to shop him for the last week, and nobody's buying right now. So I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, once Doug Baldwin went down, it was pretty much curtains, sadly. It's just, it's crazy. I mean, they're a team that, like I said, he's a Hall of Fame talent. And it's just since that one draft a couple of years ago, just trying to get talent on this team has just been, nearly impossible. Pick after pick. And I guess Jimmy Graham, that trade you could say maybe kind of worked out. I don't know. But it's just, it stinks, man. As a 49er fan, I wanted to hate Russell Wilson so bad when he came into the league. But I mean, he's won me over at this point. I mean, the guy is just so good, and it's just a shame what's going on in Seattle.
I got another guy I want to ask you about, Eric, and I'm looking at him on DraftKings right now. He's 4,600, and that's Phillip Lindsey. What's your take on the Broncos backfield?
Yeah, Lindsey's interesting. Actually, on Number Fire, I wrote an article, I believe it was my top 5 players that were not invited to the NFL Combine, and Phillip Lindsey was on that list. And it was probably, I guess, the biggest hit that I had on that particular article. I mean, when you're talking about non-combine guys, just to get 1 or 2 decent guys, I think is pretty good. So, yeah, Lindsey is a guy I liked a lot coming out. He is undersized and whatnot, and that probably played a factor in why he wasn't drafted at all. But the Denver Broncos wisely, he was a local guy. I believe he went to Colorado State, I want to say. Took a chance on a local guy, and it's definitely paying off. I liked Royce Freeman a lot. I mean, we were really high on him at Player Profiler. I still think this will eventually break Freeman's way at some point. Lindsey, again, he's a smaller guy. Freeman, 229 pounds. He's got an 86th percentile speed score, 83rd percentile agility score. I would imagine he's probably pretty dirt cheap right now if you wanted to try to acquire him in season long as well as in Dynasty. I don't think you certainly couldn't play him in cash because it does look like a split situation. So it's interesting. I'm kind of torn here because these are 2 guys I really liked coming out of coming into the draft and afterwards. So it's difficult to see 2 players that you like kind of competing head to head here. Lindsey certainly looks like he's pulling away with it, but I'm not ready to count Royce Freeman out just yet.
Yeah, it looks like they're going I think someone in Denver mentioned that they're going with the hot hand approach because the workload was just so different from what you were expecting in the last game. It's a close game with the Raiders, and Phillip Lindsey has 14 carries, and Royce Freeman, I think, had 4. So it was just a crazy split in the workload. Freeman did get the goal line carry, so obviously you're happy with that, but very weird situation in Denver.
Yeah, 8 carries for only 28 yards. 14 of that came on one run. So outside of that, didn't do a whole heck of a lot. And then, he scored the touchdown, as you mentioned. Only 1 target in the passing game. Yeah, unfortunate. But yeah, he's still a guy. I'm not ready to give up on him. Although it is really cool to see Lindsey, a guy that I thought was really, really disrespected. He was a big college producer, and didn't really get a chance to show it at the Combine, which I thought was kind of silly. But good for him. But yeah, I think Freeman like I said, he was a huge producer in college as well, and he really has more of the prototypical size and whatnot. So, we've seen this. We've seen situations like this play out before, where it takes a couple of weeks or by midseason or whatever. And Lindsey being a smaller guy, if Denver, they could be playing with fire here. If they say, okay, we're going to make him the featured guy, and then he gets blasted a couple times, he's not really built for that. And then Freeman's going to inherit that role that way, which would be unfortunate. So, I just think that in the end, Freeman's still the guy that I would want to bet on.
Sure. And I know I messaged you last week on Twitter, and you said that you were targeting Phillip Lindsey on the waiver wire. So that appears to be a great ad right now. Are there any players, and this may air after the waivers have come and gone, but still maybe some of these players will be lingering. Are there any players this week that you're trying to add on off of waivers?
Well, Gio Bernard is definitely the guy, with Mixon. There's reports that he's going to miss, 2-3 weeks, and then there's reports he's going to miss like multiple months. You just don't know how guys are going to respond. So, Gio Bernard, he can run it, he can catch the ball, he can do anything. So Bernard's definitely going to be the guy, the most significant guy. And then you have to look at Callaway in Cleveland. I think Landry's a little banged up. Then of course they just gave up on Josh Gordon kind of unexpectedly out of nowhere. Callaway looked really good on that deep ball they threw to him, and he scored for a touchdown. So Callaway is a guy I think you definitely want to get. Corey Clement, from Philadelphia. There's rumors that Jay Ajayi's back issue is going to keep him from playing. So that's definitely a guy that you want to get. Philadelphia's got kind of a weird rotation with their backs, which is probably the right football move, but obviously as fantasy players, it's not what you want to see. you also want to take a look at what's going to happen with Darren Sproles if he's going to be healthy or not, because I believe he missed week 2. So Clement could inherit just a pretty big role by default. So those are the guys that you want to spend your fab, and your people are still doing the waiver priority. I mean, you got to talk to your commissioner about that one and get with the times. But those are some guys that you could use your priority on if you're still doing that.
Absolutely. What do you think is going on in Pittsburgh right now with Le'Veon Bell? Obviously, he has not yet reported to the team, and now there appears to be an issue with Antonio Brown. I don't know if this was an excused absence or if he just didn't show up on Monday, but what is going on in Pittsburgh? Are things just falling apart all over the place over there?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, anytime your 2-star future Hall of Famers are not in your building, that's, yeah. I mean, you want to raise the flags, signal the alarm bells, or whatever, any cliche you could throw at this situation, would be appropriate. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, he wants to get paid. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. It's understandable. It's fine. I have no issues with him holding out. I don't think it's a good move, though, to miss games and miss paychecks. There was a report earlier in the offseason that his agent had agreed to a contract. I know the agent gets a lot of blame here, but there was a report earlier in the offseason that Bell's agent gave him the thumbs up on a contract, and Bell overrode him and said, no, that's not good enough. So, then he sees Todd Gurley get paid, and I believe there's another running back, I think, also that got paid in the offseason as well. That's not coming to mind.
David Johnson got paid recently.
David Johnson. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, David Johnson got some money as well. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, Johnson and Gurley, the guys that are pretty much, right in that same conversation, got paid, and he didn't. So, I mean, I get it. These are guys that, 1 or 2 injuries and, you're not in the league anymore. Quite literally, that's the way it works sometimes. So I get it. I get it. Again, I think it's totally fine to hold out, and kind of, if that's the way that, business gets done, then so be it. But yeah, I mean, at this point, he definitely should have showed up for work. As for Antonio Brown, I mean, I think the guy's livid. He's just frustrated. They tied the freaking Browns in week 1, and then, they lose again. It's a tough situation. He wants to win. He probably feels like the team isn't really doing the right thing by Le'Veon Bell. I don't know if they're close friends or whatnot, but he probably says, hey, let's pay Le'Veon Bell. Let's get him in here. Let's win some games. Let's get this thing back on track. So, I don't know if Juju Smith's ascension is leading to any of these frustrations as well. If he feels like maybe he's getting passed by, who knows? But yeah, I mean, he's just pissed off. So, I get it. I mean, this is a team that, probably had Super Bowl aspirations. Their defense, though, looks terrible. And, one of their star players hasn't shown up. So it's, yeah, I can see why he's frustrated. Definitely should have shown up for work, though. That's, no excuse for that.
Yeah, and if you're a Le'Veon Bell owner, what are you doing with him? I had to deal with this. I actually just traded Le'Veon Bell away a couple on Saturday night. Are you trying to hang on, or are you trying to get 50 cents on the dollar? What are you trying to do with Le'Veon Bell if you have him on your team?
Well, I mean, if it's season long, I think at this point you probably do have to try to make a move and just get whatever you can, unfortunately. In Dynasty, I think you just hold tight. I mean, it sucks that, sure. But in Dynasty, Bell, he's going to show up at some point this season. It was week 10, because Vincent Jackson did this a couple years ago to the then San Diego Chargers. I think it's like week 10. There's a certain cutoff where you have to show up for it to count as a year towards your free agency.
I think it is week 10.
Yeah, so that's when Bell's going to show up at that point. In season long, if you just let Bell rot on your bench until then, you're probably not going to be competitive. Obviously that all kind of depends on how your draft went, and if you got Phillip Lindsey off waivers, maybe you're doing okay. Hopefully you got Connor, you might be okay. But if you're 0-2 and you've got Le'Veon Bell, yeah. I mean, the thing that really stinks about that in that situation is all the owners know you're 0-2 and have Le'Veon Bell as well. So they're not exactly feeling sorry for you and aren't exactly going to get you the best offer. So, you might just be kind of hosed there, sadly. But
P-Tash, your deal is looking more and more like the deal of the century now the more I look at it.
I'm feeling good about it.
Tell Eric what you did.
I traded Le'Veon Bell, Jay Ajayi, and Marvin Jones for Zeke Elliott.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Elliott hasn't really – I think he scored twice. He hasn't hit 100 yards yet, but he's playing.
Yeah.
He's healthy. That's,
He's on the field.
He is a good football player that is actually playing football, and that's more than you can say for Le'Veon Bell. So yeah, I mean that's pretty darn good. But yeah, I have Le'Veon Bell in a dynasty league, and yeah, I just have to sit here and watch and collect some L's for a couple of weeks. It's rough.
All right, and I know that we touched on the Josh Gordon trade to the Patriots. What kind of expectations do you have for Josh Gordon as a Patriot, and how do you think it affects their other pass catchers, Hogan, Gronk, Edelman?
Yeah, I have very little expectations right now. I mean, Josh Gordon, it's been years since he's been, played a full season and been really good. Granted, that season was absolutely phenomenal, but, it's been a while. And I think the Patriots probably did this more so with the future in mind. A lot of, I wouldn't necessarily compare it to the Randy Moss trade. We haven't seen multiple seasons like that out of Josh Gordon. But it makes sense for New England standpoint to do this. However, we've seen multiple veteran wide receivers come to New England and literally retire. We talked about the Bills quitting in the middle of seasons. We've seen guys like Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt, future Hall of Famers. We've seen those guys, show up to training camp with the Patriots, take a look at the playbook, get yelled at a couple times on the practice field and just pack their bags and quit. We just saw this with Eric Decker as well. Andrew Hawkins, who was a decent little slot receiver for Cleveland for a couple of years. He came to New England. He tried it out and he quit as well. So I don't think Josh Gordon's going to just up and quit. He's not really in a situation like any of these guys where he's got, multiple contracts and stuff banked away, but it does show you over several years that receivers have struggled to just show up and be good as New England players. So I'm not really too worried about it. I think it's questionable if he's even going to be active for the first couple of weeks as he kind of gets acclimated to things. I think there is also some sort of condition within the trade where if he's active for X amount of weeks, that New England gives up an additional late round pick. So there's this very, very slight incentive to just make, to kind of skirt around that as well. So I don't think it really affects things at all. If somebody drafted Chris Hogan and, they probably had the week 1 near goose egg and then sat him for the week 2 explosion. And then they're thinking, oh my God, Josh Gordon's coming in and Julian Edelman is going to be here soon. And I got to get rid of this guy now coming off a big game. I would definitely want to talk to that guy and acquire Chris Hogan. So I'm not too worried. I'm not really too worried about how it's going to affect things, at least in the near to intermediate future.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I said the other day, I think Gordon is most likely going to be worthless this year. And then, of course, he goes on and gets traded to the Patriots. So now my homer bias comes in, and I'm starting to think maybe he will have a great year. But I really don't think that's going to happen. And mainly because, like you said, the Patriots playbook is just intense. You've seen many players come through in the past, and even if they make it onto the field, they're not really the players that we anticipated that they would be. If I own Gordon, I'm still trying to trade him, and I mean, I guess he's not a bad play if you can acquire him for very little and see what happens, or if you have him on your team, obviously hold on to him and see how it plays out for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue, especially in Dynasty, is the Josh Gordon owner has been the Josh Gordon owner, and he's kind of used to this at this point. So if he hasn't flipped him yet, he's probably just going to stand still and just continue to bide time.
Eric, I need you to make me feel better about the Green Bay Packers backfield. I touted Jamal Williams all preseason. I said he was going to be a top 10 running back, and Aaron Jones is back this week, and I think I've made a mistake.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones is a guy, and I know Player Profiler we've liked more than Jamal Williams, the entire time. So Aaron Jones is here. Unfortunately, Jamal Williams did not really do very much of anything to hold him off. So here we go. So I like Aaron Jones a lot. College dominator in the 96th percentile. College yards per carry, 96th percentile. College target share, 89th percentile. All these are all numbers from Player Profiler. He was well into the high 80 percentiles in both the burst score and agility score at the combine. So, I mean, he definitely looks like the real deal. He had definitely flashed at moments last year and then tried to play. I think it was like through a knee injury or whatever the case was, and didn't look so hot when he attempted that. But yeah, we saw some flashes. I guess the only issue potentially here would be Aaron Rodgers, where we've seen this before, where when he plays hurt with a lower, with a leg or knee issue, they put him in shotgun and they throw a lot. So, Aaron Jones may not even get a ton of carries because Rodgers physically right now, putting him, under center, doing drop backs, all that kind of stuff. It's probably not the best thing for him right now. So they're probably just going to put these guys in shotgun and throw it a bunch still. So, Jamal Williams looks like a sunk cost at this point. Aaron Jones, I would expect to take over. But even then, I don't think you can set your expectations overly high. If Aaron Rodgers was totally healthy and they were more interested in running the ball, then I would be way, way more excited about Aaron Jones. But just the situation right now, I would say it's a little iffy.
That's a great point, Eric, about Aaron Rodgers needing to pass from the shotgun a lot. I think that knee injury is definitely affecting him, so I could easily see that happening. You also mentioned playerprofiler.com, and this is a tool that I was actually just turned on to this year by my buddy Mike here, P-Tash. And I'm just curious. So you mentioned some of those numbers. How does that translate to fantasy football? And which numbers do you put the most credence in when you're looking at this a profile for a player?
Well, I mean, like the combine stuff and stuff that I mentioned, those are sort of aggregate scores we take, and we have a terms glossary where, I won't bore you with the minutiae here, but, you can get kind of dive as deep as you want to on the site. We like that a lot, especially guys like, Aaron Jones, for example, who doesn't really have much of a resume. It's just a real quick and easy way to get a kind of a whole snapshot of, was this guy good in college? What did he do well? How does he stack up physically, with some of these measurables? So that's kind of the cool thing. Once a guy's been in once the guy's been in the league for a couple of years and we kind of know more or less who he is, a lot of the collegiate record, the workout metrics, that stuff kind of dissipates. It doesn't, if you look at Jarvis Landry, for example, his numbers are just horrific in terms of his combine numbers. So coming in, you would think, oh, that's not a particularly attractive player, but at this point we kind of know he's good. So you can sort of dismiss that. So, we use that to get a beat on kind of guys ahead of time. If you've listened to the RotoUnderworld podcast and Matt Kelly for a couple of years, we've used this site to hit on guys like Quincy Enunwa, Cameron Meredith, Phillip, Lindsey. I mentioned as well. He was a guy that came to my attention through these numbers as well. So, we're not going to sit here and pretend like just a guy crushes the combine and he's going to be amazing, because we've seen Christine Michael bounce around the league for like a decade at this point, and we know it's not all the combine. The college production is also very important. So when we see that mixture of both, we see the college production, we see good combine or pro day workouts, those are definitely attractive situations. So, beyond that, we also do have we do have a pretty robust team of guys that are game analysts, actually watch the games, very pro football focus-ish system that we have going on. So we've got a great group of guys that are charting the games. And so when you scroll down and you look a lot of those statistics, if you take a look, your juke rate, evaded tackles, all that kind of stuff. Those are the money throws, the danger plays, all that stuff. Those are actual numbers that are being calculated by people that are working with Player Profiler to help us chart those games. So that's where that stuff comes from.
Huh. I actually haven't even really noticed the lower down numbers, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I usually kind of get distracted by all these cool graphs and stuff, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've got a lot of cool stats. Yeah, a lot of it is sort of composite stuff that we kind of come up with our own. It's real cool stuff. So definitely scroll down, look at look at the other stuff. We got a lot of really cool stuff on there. So we got a lot of people working a lot of long hours and sleepless nights putting all this stuff together. So definitely scroll down a little bit further and unearth some of that real good content.
Player Profiler definitely clued me into Quincy Enunwa. I've been tracking him for years and constantly, whenever he's healthy, adding him into my team. I got him the other day. Is Matt Kelly still all in on Jeff Janis, or are those days gone?
Yeah, Janis, I don't think he hasn't landed anywhere, right? I don't even think he has like a practice squad.
I was hoping he'd come to the Patriots.
Yeah, Matt's mentioned the college that Janis went to. One of the big high ups in New England's personnel department went to the same college, so it seemed inevitable, but no, didn't happen. I mean, I jokingly referred to when I introduced him on the RotoUnderworld Game Night on RotoGrinders Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, by the way. When I introduced Matt, I call his location the Jeff Janis Memorial Studios. So that's kind of where we're at with Janis, unfortunately.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, so there's a few more guys that I'd like to ask you about in season long, and just kind of get your take on them. How concerned are you about David Johnson? I actually thought that he was going to be the top player in fantasy this season, but it just doesn't look like it's going to happen with Sam Bradford leading the Arizona offense. Are you getting concerned about David Johnson this year?
Extremely concerned. I mean, you have to be. I didn't really in season long. I always ended up kind of in the middle, so I don't really have David Johnson in any season long league. So, I definitely would have taken him probably second. I would say as high as second. I would have taken Gurley first, but yeah, I like DJ over Zeke. Obviously, that doesn't look too good right now. What is going on? I mean, I know Sam Bradford is, not. I mean, actually, I thought this would be okay with Sam Bradford being a more of a conservative check down guy. However, what offensive coordinator Mike McCoy is doing right now pretty much amounts to sabotage. If you take a look at David Johnson's targets or lack thereof, it makes absolutely no sense. This is a guy that played receiver in college and was very good at it. And we've seen under Bruce Arians, we've seen David Johnson run like legitimate wide receiver type routes, wheel routes, go routes. He's basically a receiver. And you can play him like that. You can put him in the slot. You can put him outside. You can do whatever you want with David Johnson. Mike McCoy, I don't know. I mean, he's been coaching in the league for multiple years. I would imagine he is aware of who David Johnson is and what David Johnson can do. He can Google David Johnson. He can look at David Johnson tape. He can look at David Johnson highlights on YouTube. He could, if he's got kids, he can watch them play the Madden football game, and see what David Johnson is capable of. But he's not interested in doing any of those things. And it really doesn't it doesn't make any sense. His ADOT, his average depth of target is way down from, as I mentioned, how Arians used him like a real coach would. I don't know. I don't get it. At a certain point, David Johnson just has to, go in there and say like, hey, I'm good at catching the ball, throw it to me. Like, can we do that? I don't know. If I was David Johnson, I would be just like flipping tables and just, I would be livid. I mean, it's sabotage. I don't know. I don't know. Did David Johnson like park in Mike McCoy's spot or something? Like, I don't know. It's just, it's bad. So yeah, I'm very concerned. His price on DraftKings is way, way down this week. So he's kind of interesting from that standpoint. I guess you could probably buy low on him at some point. I mean, they've got to get their stuff together here and actually use this guy the right way. They're running him inside. I mean, historically, he's been very good running the outside. It just doesn't make any sense. This is just bad coaching. This is my scheme. I don't care like who the player is. You got to fit what I do. And it just runs completely counter to everything we've seen from the Patriots, the Eagles, like these teams that actually like win games and go to Super Bowls and do like really important things. That's how they coach. Mike McCoy, you've been bouncing around for a while for a reason. And, David Johnson is the latest example of that.
Yeah, and do you think it'll get any better if they make the switch to Josh Rosen, or do you think it's more scheme-based that he's struggling?
It's got to be the scheme. I mean, Sam Bradford knows that David Johnson's good too. I mean, just, I don't know. And that didn't, and actually when I was watching that game, that didn't make any sense to me either. It's a blowout. Why not put Josh Rosen in for a couple, for a couple series, and let's just see if the guy's competent. I understand it was against the Rams. But I'm sure if you kind of put up the white flag, bring out your rookie quarterback, I'm sure they're not going to be interested in, Sue's probably going to want to sit. Darnold, hey, we don't want to injure our quarterback. You guys, how about you don't want your guys to get injured either. Let's just, go into preseason mode here for the last couple possessions. Sure. So I don't know, whatever Arizona's doing, it's not working. It's embarrassing. It's it's so bad. I understand they're not particularly deep, but David Johnson, as you mentioned, it made all the sense in the world where he would just get just an avalanche of opportunities and challenge for the RB1 and the top overall player. But just the way they're calling plays and designing things is definitely looks like it's not going to happen. I can't imagine this goes on much longer until like David Johnson should just bring in like the Bruce Arians playbook and say, this is what we're doing from now on.
I'm the coach now.
Yeah.
Coach.
From what's that movmovie?
I'm the captain.
I'm the captain now. Yeah. That's David Johnson. I'm the captain now.
Yeah, he really should do that. And I'm looking forward to his schedule. It's not getting any easy for him. Chicago, that's going to be an absolute annihilation. Just watching that game is going to be entertaining from the standpoint that I'd like to see how many sacks Khalil Mack gets and how much Sam Bradford gets destroyed. So that's going to be tough. Then he gets Seattle. He's got your 49ers after that. Then he gets Minnesota and Denver. Then he gets San Francisco again and then a bye week. So I'm definitely concerned if I own David Johnson here. And you're totally right. I mean, 2 targets last week in the receiving game. It's just unacceptable when you have a guy like David Johnson in the backfield.
Yeah, in a blowout, like it just doesn't make sense, man. Mike McCoy, you got to go.
So I need quarterback help in one of my leagues, and I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat. I don't think there's much a player that's playing better, maybe outside of Patrick Mahomes, who's putting up the numbers that he is, outside of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Is he finally legit? Can we trust this guy this year?
Oh, man, Ryan Fitzpatrick has always been legit. What are we talking about? This is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzmagic is a great story. I mean, it is a great NFL story. I've loved this guy for a while. The league is so much better when Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing well. Back in 2015, during that initial Fitzmagic run with the Jets, I actually had I benched Aaron Rodgers in the fantasy playoffs, and I won my league using Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's when Rodgers didn't. That's when Rodgers didn't have Jordy Nelson and wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot. And Fitzpatrick just every week, man, it was like 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. I love it. He's a guy. He's super aggressive. So when the team around him is good and he's got playmakers, he can be successful, definitely. And that's what we're seeing, with Tampa Bay, Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I guess it helps that their running backs are just horrible, as well. So yeah, he's, when you put him on a bad team with bad players around him, that aggressive nature, as we've seen time and time again, just leads to just a ton of turnovers. So, it's bad from that standpoint, but I mean, he's a good player. He's competent. If you go to Player Profiler, I just updated the Ryan Fitzpatrick headshot, which you can imagine what that is after his amazing press conference.
That's classic.
So
it looks like he's having a great time.
I love it. I mean, could he turn into a pumpkin at some point? Sure. Jameis Winston's return is coming up very soon. It's going to be hard to bench him. I'll say that. Winston, I think he's got like a lawsuit now pending. I saw right before we went online here. So
like an Uber driver or something.
Yeah. So, it's the same incident that got him suspended. So he's not really in jeopardy further from that standpoint. But I mean, Winston, we've seen for a couple of years now. He's just, he's like, he's okay. He's decent. He's not really the guy that they thought he was when they drafted him. So, you're winning games. Fitzpatrick's playing amazing. I would not mess with this one bit. So, if I'm a coach, I would continue to ride this out. But as we just talked about with Arizona, coaches don't always do the most intelligent things. Dirk Cutter, I'm not wild about him as Tampa's head coach either. But man, just keep it going. Yeah, quarterback, there's streamers, streamers are available quite a bit, but yeah, if you landed on Fitzpatrick, yeah, I would just keep riding this thing out.
For sure. And I know you're high on one of his targets, Chris Godwin. What can you tell about him and why you're so high on him?
Yeah, Godwin, I was ready to play him across the board in DFS last week until Deshaun Jackson was cleared, but yeah, Godwin, as we pull him up on Player Profiler, pretty much the site tells the story how good he is. Just phenomenal. You take a look here, the 40-yard dash, his speed score, pushing the 90th percentile. Very good burst and agility scores as well. Catch radius, 78th percentile. His Spark X score, we kind of kind of take an aggregate of everything and just kind of mash it all together to simulate Nike's Spark score, their athleticism score. He's 95th percentile. He broke out at a very young age while he was playing at Penn State. In college dominator, 67th percentile. So just super productive in college. I believe he was over 1,100 receiving yards as a sophomore. You know, he's over 6 feet tall. He's over 200 pounds. Just kind of hits all the marks that you want. You know, he was a steal. He's a late 3rd round pick. You know, we loved him on the site. Just, you know, the production plus the metrics, he just made all the sense in the world. He was, you know, just a phenomenal value in the real life draft. It's a little tricky in fantasy because, you know, he's essentially the 3rd target. But hey, if the running backs continue to play this bad for Tampa and Fitzmagic is still a thing here in a couple of weeks, you know, Godwin's gonna get his as well. He scored. Take a look here, week 2. Yeah, five catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. He scored in week 1 as well. So he's playing over 60% of the snaps. So yeah, 6 targets total. Yeah, his usage actually went up from week 1 up to week 2. So yeah, just a phenomenal player. Basically hit, you know, coming out of the combine, basically hit all the numbers that we were looking for, and a guy that we've been high on for a while.
So I actually played Godwin this week, not in DFS, but in my season log league. And I came across an article of yours because I typed in Chris Godwin. I don't know what I typed in, Chris Godwin waiver wire or something. And I'm reading the article and I was like, oh, this is a good article. Who wrote this? And I go up and it's Eric McClung. Sorry. Mans calls you McClung. So I got that name in my head.
Oh, he loved the Mans. No, he's the best. So yeah, that's something I wrote for Yahoo. Just some basic some quick takeaways from week 1. And yeah, Chris Godwin was the headliner there. And yeah, we called him a star in the making. And yeah, I totally believe that. You know, Mike Evans, you know, has some flaws. Deshaun Jackson's, you know, age, and you know, we've seen him get banged up. It looked like he was, you know, going to be iffy for week 2. Ended up playing, so he's 32 now. So don't know exactly how long that's going to hold up. And yeah, once Deshaun is out of there, you know, I think they signed Mike Evans long term. So it's going to be, you know, the Evans Godwin show for quite a while.
Yeah. Do people call you McClung just like as a nickname?
Well, you know, McDoodle is actually a nickname I picked up in Slope softball a couple of years ago. So yeah, I don't really get too much. Don't really get a lot of nicknames.
Really?
Stuff, but yeah,
it's such a good name. I feel like it's one of those names that like you name your running back when you make a creator player in Madden. He's like something McClung. I don't know.
No, I've never gotten that.
It's a great name.
No, there was actually a major league player, pitcher, Seth McClung, who he was a big ginger, burly, kind of the exact opposite of me. I'm kind of a skinny white dude. He was this big burly ginger guy. He wasn't particularly good pitcher, but you know, I mean, just getting to the major leagues is quite an accomplishment. So not a long history of McClungs in athletics, but you know, we did get one into the majors, so I'll definitely count that.
Fewer Patashniks in pro sports.
That's true. The old P-Tash.
Duncan, you got anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you quick, kind of nerd out for a second, and I like looking at numbers, and especially with baseball, I like looking at sabermetrics. And I'm just curious, do you have anything like that? A lot of these sites are coming out with sort of more of a sabermetric approach, like Pro Football Focus. You guys have a lot of stuff here. I'm looking at air yards and things like that. Do you have any particular favorite statistics, kind of advanced things that you're looking at in terms of players?
Yeah, well, from the player level, I mean, yeah, you pretty much hit it. Air yards is a huge one. Average depth of target, big one as well. And what's cool about those is we've seen, and you can pull up articles and dive into it as deep as you want, but we've seen that these are stats and things that are predictive. They're not descriptive, which, you know, a lot of these stats are kind of like the next gen stuff, like, oh, his top speed. And, you know, some of this stuff is, you know, like average yards, like yards per carry against a certain type of defensive front, you know, that kind of, you know, it's like, how are you going to, you know, you're not going to know how many, I mean, you can kind of get a rough idea, but I don't think if you really bake that into a projection system, you're really going to get much more predictive by, you know, figuring out, you know, how good is he against a base defense versus a stacked box and that kind of stuff. Those are more descriptive things. It's cool. It's kind of neat to know, but is it really going to make a big difference? Are you really going to spot a breakout type of player by those kinds of numbers? Probably not. So yeah, air yards, average depth of target, those are two huge ones. From a team level, especially against opposing defenses, Warren Sharp has a phenomenal site, which is all free, sharpfootballstats.com. If you take a look at the success rate that defenses have against the run, against the pass, he's also got like big plays. I mean, you could spend hours on Sharp Football Stats. There's all sorts of great stuff on there. So from a team level, and when I'm looking at DFS and figuring out, is this a good matchup? Is this a bad matchup? Whatever the case may be, Sharp Football Stats is one of the windows I always have open because I want to know kind of what those success rates are, because the box scores and things can get really misleading, especially right now early on, because, like the New Orleans Saints, for example, their defense was bad in the beginning of last year, and then they turned it around and turned out to be very, very good. And that could happen again. They added players in the offseason. They didn't really lose any significant ones. So the Saints could turn this thing around. But they've got, two pretty bad games on their resume. So it's really going to tie them down in terms of just sort of average, yards and all that kind of stuff. Touchdowns allowed, all that kind of stuff is going to go, it's going to get really skewed. Same deal where, a defense maybe is not very good, but just hasn't played anybody yet. They've got 2 layup opponents and their numbers look outstanding. But if you go to Sharp Football Stats and some of these other sites and you see like, oh, wow, like the opposition has actually been really successful against them in the run. They're just not scoring touchdowns. They're not really sustaining drives because they're just not particularly good. But they have, been overall successful in terms of, converting first downs and things like that. So that can really open your eyes. He's got also on that site a trending thing too. So you can actually look at like just the past couple of weeks. So you can pinpoint like maybe a defense had a significant injury, say in week 6. So, hey, let me take a look at this defense from week 6 to the present, or, things like that. There's just tons of things that you can do on the team level. And I think that's really where analytics and advanced statistics and things like that are probably the most useful, especially for DFS and for fantasy. Player efficiency can really swing kind of wildly from one year to the next. It's hard to bank on that. Especially in small sample size guys like, Deshaun Watson just looked like, the second coming of the quarterback, in his tiny sample last year. This year looks a little bit more human. Playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league certainly doesn't help. But, I think from on a player level, there's not a ton that can be predictive. A lot of it is just kind of fancy. Hey, this is a cool thing to look at. But the team level, I think, is really probably your best bet where you really want to hunker down. And because, like I said, there's defenses that can really mislead you, especially right now with only a game or two. We'll have 3, 4. Even then, it doesn't really sustain until like mid-season.
That's great. Thanks, man. I have actually never been on here before. I've heard of Sharp Football, but this is kind of like a almost a Fangraphs kind of thing for football, looks like. So
yeah, Sharp Football Stats. Yeah, that one is just great. Yeah, airyards.com is also really good. You mentioned that, and those two are free. There's sites that are charging. Fantasy Insiders has some great new tools. Josh, Fantasy ADHD, does some really cool stuff. He built a lot of the apps that RotoViz has, but he's now with and RotoViz has a lot of phenomenal stuff too. If you subscribe to RotoViz, you know that there's a lot of great tools there. But Fantasy Insiders, they have Fantasy ADHD over there now, and he's building a lot of cool stuff for them. So he's a great guy to follow on Twitter, and definitely check out what he's doing on Fantasy Insiders. He's got a lot of cool free stuff on there. So yeah, it's a cool thing. Yeah. I mean, baseball, yeah, it's almost like passe at this point. We've been screaming for an analytical revolution in baseball for a long time, and it finally happened. And, we're just kind of getting settled in, but yeah, with football, it's still something that's very much on the horizon, and it's just really cool to see, so many smart people, Warren Sharp, Josh Hermsmeyer with Air Yards, Fantasy ADHD, just so many people doing a lot of great stuff. Making people look a lot smarter. I mean, I wish I could program and, use R and Python and all the stuff that they're doing. That's a little over my head. So I just kind of consume the information, spit it out, and it makes for good content, makes us sound a lot smarter.
There you go.
All right, so it's been great having Eric McClung here with us tonight. Make sure that you check him out on RotoWorld's Game Night on Fridays at 9 p.m. on RotoGrinders. Also, make sure that you follow him on Twitter at Eric McClung. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Eric.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely tune in. The Roto Underworld Game Night, Friday nights, 9 p.m. RotoGrinders, as you mentioned. Yeah, it's been a blast. I've got Fantasy Mansion, Matt Kelly with me, also Ben Gretsch, who's a super smart guy as well. So, yeah, I've got two of the best. And, it's a blast doing the show. Thank you very much for having me on. Let me plug away here on all these little side things I got. I also do a weekly article on Number Fire for DFS, so you certainly check that out. So, great, man. It's getting late here on the East Coast, but, I'll have some breakfast. I'll fire up the griddle. I got no problems with little breakfast for dinner.
There you go. Awesome.
Thanks, Eric.
No problem.
All right, so we're going to preview the Jets-Browns game. The New York Jets are traveling to Cleveland on Thursday night to take on the Browns. Going to start with quarterback Tyrod Taylor. I would sit him in this one. I think you can do better. He's got 3 total touchdowns on the season and 2 interceptions to go with that. I'd only play him in a 2-quarterback league. He's been saved each of the first 2 weeks by throwing touchdown passes with less than 2 minutes to go in each game. Week 1, Josh Gordon bailed him out with a great catch. Last week, he got saved by Antonio Callaway's touchdown. And while I think he has a relatively safe floor, I don't think the ceiling's very high in this one. I think there's better options out there. I assume that you have a better quarterback on your roster, maybe Fitzpatrick, Blake Bortles, or even Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I feel like this game could just be real ugly. One of these early Thursday night games, the Browns and the Jets it could be sloppy. And the under here is 39.5 points. So probably not going to be a ton of scoring here. So Tyrod Taylor, not a great option. Could get you some points on the ground. But yeah, if you have other players, definitely start them.
I feel much better about their running back, Carlos Hyde. I think he's a must-start as an RB2 due to the workload he's getting. He's averaging 19 carries over the first 2 games and has scored a touchdown in each game. If they get close, he's definitely the guy they're giving the ball to. Do you agree on Carlos Hyde?
Hyde on a workload perspective, I like him. However, efficiency-wise, he's really struggling right now. He's 2.8 yards per carry. The Jets are only giving up 87 rushing yards per game. So personally, I'd like to get away from Hyde if I could, and I'd probably be fading him in season-long leagues in DFS as well.
I think Jarvis Landry is an obvious start in this game. He's listed as questionable right now with a hamstring injury, but I think that's more of getting him some rest on a very short week. He's by far their best receiving option. It's going to be hard to ever sit this guy, especially now that they've traded away Josh Gordon. 22 targets in the first 2 games. I think the targets are definitely going to be there. I'm starting Jarvis Landry pretty much every week.
Yeah, he's a must-start. Guy's a playmaker. He's got, like you said, 22 targets. It's good for 32% target share of the Browns, and it's just going to be getting better from here on out with the loss of Josh Gordon there. So must-start for Landry. Definitely get him in your lineup.
Do you have any thoughts on any of the other wide receivers in Cleveland that you're maybe thinking about?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk between Callaway and he was kind of a hot waiver wire ad this week. I think that people are kind of sleeping on Rashard Higgins, though. In week 1, in terms of snap count, he was at 61% to Higgins 17%. So he functioned as the wide receiver 3 in week 1. In week 2, a little bit of a flip script there. He had 74%. Callaway hit 81%. Callaway also caught the touchdown late. But if you've been watching these guys play, Higgins to me has flashed. I think he's a talented receiver. Last week he had 5 catches on 7 targets for 47 yards during the loss to the Saints. Interesting situation. I would definitely keep a close eye here and see which player is being favored by Tyrod Taylor. So far, I really do think that Higgins is going to be the guy, but that touchdown last week was a little bit fluky. People definitely jumped all over that looking at the box score. But to me, Higgins is the guy who I would probably prefer as the upcoming number 2 receiver. So if he's on your waiver wire in deep leagues, I might add him. But otherwise, just put him on the watch list. Keep a close eye on him this week. He could be a waiver wire addition next week.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I definitely want to keep an eye on Rashard Higgins and see how this second wide receiver situation develops in Cleveland. I think that over the next few weeks, it's going to be very interesting to see if Antonio Callaway takes that role, or Rashard Higgins, but I don't think right now you can use either guy. The roles are just too uncertain. Somebody that I think you need to use is David Njoku. I would definitely start him as a back end tight end one. Tight end is just so bad this year. The position is just a big steaming pile of shit. So unless you have a top guy like Gronkowski or Ertz, Njoku's somebody that has to be in your lineup. He's fifth in the league amongst tight ends with 14 targets. And with Gordon leaving, they're going to have to lean on this guy in the red zone. And I don't think there's many better options out there in terms of targets. So I think you have to start Njoku if you have him.
Yeah, Njoku right now getting 20% of the targets in this offense. He's a very talented tight end. Right now that ranks as fifth in the league amongst tight ends. So definitely seeing the target share. Hasn't had the results yet, but kind of feel like Njoku is due for a score. So if you have him on your roster, definitely would throw him out there, see what he can get. I mean, like you said, it's kind of a pile of poo-poo right now. So if he gets in the end zone, he's going to be a good play.
And we don't often associate great defensive play with the Cleveland Browns, but a lot of people very high on their defense. They're going to be a popular streaming option. What do you think about the Cleveland Browns defense going up against the Jets?
I love this matchup. I think it's a really good spot for the Browns. So far, 7 sacks through 2 games. That ranks 7th in the NFL. 3 interceptions, which ranks 5th. They just came off a game where they held the Saints to 62 rushing yards and 21 points. So Cleveland defense really turning it up here. They've got Myles Garrett, who's just an absolute savage. To quote the one-man thrill ride, he's just a beast on the defense. Denzel Ward, they added to the secondary. He's looking like he could be a top 10 cornerback, top 5 cornerback potentially even by the end of the season. So they're really looking good. They're favored to win by 3 points here. Low scoring game. Like I mentioned, the over is 39.5. So, and then the other thing we mentioned is that it's Darnold coming off of a short week, playing on Thursday, rookie quarterback, already has 3 interceptions and a fumble. So I'm looking for the Browns here to put up some good numbers as a fantasy DST.
Yeah, I know I'm streaming them in a few leagues, and their defensive line has been playing great. They've held 2 strong offenses, the Saints and the Steelers, to 21 points each. They're going back home after a demoralizing loss to the Saints, and I really think they're approaching this as a must-win game, and you have to feel good about them, playing at home against a rookie quarterback on a short week. And that does lead us into the Jets. Sam Darnold, an obvious sit at this point. I expect him to struggle in this game. There's no chance I'm starting a rookie quarterback, this early in the season on a Thursday night against an emerging defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Clear sit here, but, interesting player to keep an eye on and watch this point of the year. Number 3 overall pick in this year's draft. Interesting storyline here, too. He's going against the Browns, who are currently sitting Baker Mayfield. Darnold was taken 2 spots behind Baker Mayfield. So Darnold seeing the field early in the year. Mayfield's still going to be holding the clipboard, but we'll see what the kid can do. He had a good game week 1, week 2, not so great, but I have a feeling he's going to have his hands full with the Browns.
For sure. I think it'll be a little bit easier for Bilal Powell, and I'm actually going to start him as a low-end flex option. He's playing more than Isaiah Crowell. He's only got 5 less carries on the year, but he's catching all of the balls out of the backfield from the running back position. Right now, Bilal Powell is the most valuable running back to own for the Jets, and I would play him as a low-end flex. Crowell, not so much. I'd probably sit him unless you don't have any better options. He's going to get the early down work and the goal line work, but I don't expect this to be a high-scoring affair. What do you think about the Jets' running back options this week?
I really don't feel great about either running back. I think Powell is definitely the safer guy, considering he's going to be involved in the passing game. Through the first 2 games, he's got 8 targets for 79 yards and a score. He did have 12 carries in week 1. Last week only had 5. Crowell, he had a great week in week 1. Last week he only had 35 yards on 12 carries, so put up a stinker. I really don't trust either guy, but if you got to play one, definitely it's Bilal Powell in a flex role.
Yeah, and there's only one Jets wide receiver that I would feel good about starting. That's Quincy Enunwa. If you have 3 wide receiver spots, he's got to be one of your top 3. If you don't, he's got to be in your flex spot. He's by far Sam Darnold's favorite target. He's a locked-in wide receiver 3. He has 13 catches on 21 targets and a touchdown to start the year. He's the only Jets wide receiver that I would feel comfortable starting.
Yeah, Enunwa is really a beast. I missed the boat on this guy, and I missed it last year, and it pisses me off that he's on your team. Frankly, I'm going to try to pry him off your team before the year's out. But a point that I wanted...
I've traded him to you before.
Did you really?
Yeah, I traded a couple years ago. I traded him and D'Angelo Williams to you for Latavius Murray and Matt Asiata.
I say I won that deal. I don't know. It was clear to close. Asiata at the time was doing some work, but yeah, I'm a big Enunwa fan. And one stat that I want to mention here, an advanced stat that's kind of cool from Pro Football Focus. They do points per opportunity, PPO. They take total fantasy points and they divide it by carries plus how many routes they run. So basically, any opportunity they have to get points, this is averaging it. Right now, Quincy Enunwa, 0.59 PPO, points per opportunity, which ranks 10th in the NFL. So it's getting a lot of opportunities. When he gets the ball thrown his way, he's really doing a lot with it. This kind of captures everything that he can do with that opportunity. So I really like Enunwa. I think he's going to be peppered with targets here. And even against the strong Browns defense, I think he's going to do some work.
What are your thoughts on Tyrell Pryor?
You know, Pryor actually has been coming on quite a bit here. He's got 11 targets so far. I think he's developing into... I think he's passing Robby Anderson to take that number 2 role. Right now, he leads the team with an average of 19 yards per catch. And last week, he had a nice play for a 44-yard pass where he kind of looked like his old self. And, you know, this guy's only one season removed from being a waiver wire darling, one of the best players at the wide receiver position. He was really positioning himself for a huge contract. Then he gets injured, has a completely down year, and I was just reading about him, and he was talking about how he's trying to become more violent on the field, running as violent routes. And this guy, when he is healthy, he's one of the best athletes in the NFL. So I'm keeping an eye on Pryor. I'm going to see how he develops here, but I think he's taking that number 2 role.
Yeah, Robby Anderson, he's a definite sit right now. I wouldn't drop him yet because he's so talented, but if you have Robby Anderson in your lineup, he's just a total dart throw right now. He had 1 catch in week 1 on just 1 target. It happened to be for a 41-yard touchdown that saved his week. And last week he had just 3 catches for 27 yards. So I would not feel great about using Robby Anderson. I'd keep him on the bench. I would not drop him yet, but definitely sit Robby Anderson. And that's really it for this game. I expect the Browns to really show up here and definitely beat the Jets in a low-scoring game. They're 3-point favorites, as you mentioned. I think they'll struggle to hit the total 39.5, and a big reason why that is because the Browns just signed an undrafted free agent kicker who hit less than 70% of his field goals in college. So if you're a gambling man, I would definitely bet on the Browns, and I would definitely take the under in this game. But,
our good buddy Greg Morris might be taking the under in this one. Who knows?
Yeah, I think he said he's taking the over, but I just can't.
He's taking the over?
The kicking situation the way it is, and just the lack of firepower on these offenses, I don't know how they're going to hit 40, but we'll see. We'll see, and that's really all I have for this game.
Yeah, could be a toilet bowl, which is sometimes fun to watch. I'm actually just going to be tuning in for the Cleveland defense. Frankly, I think these guys are exciting, and I want to see how the Jets offense looks. And aside from that, kind of just going to be a sloppy Thursday night, I'm sure.
That's going to do it for us here on the Fantasy Griddle podcast. Check out our website, fantasygriddle.com. Please remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Fantasy Griddle. Duncan, anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We're starting to get into more of a rhythm here with the show. We really appreciate all the support, all you guys listening to us every week. And what we're going to be doing moving forward, every Tuesday we're going to release a waiver wire podcast. And that's a show that we record on Sundays, so it won't include the Monday night game, but we'll get in some of our early waiver wire thoughts and have you that available for you on Tuesdays. And then that same day, we'll also have a blog post produced by my good buddy Mike P-Tash over here, who's been pouring his heart and soul into those articles and giving you some auction values early on for you. And then finally, we'll have a Thursday night preview and a special guest interview. Most weeks, we've got somebody lined up for next week, so hopefully we'll keep the flow going. But look for our podcast to be released on Tuesdays and Thursdays moving forward. As always, guys, if you have any questions, please leave us a comment, give us a shout on Twitter @FantasyGriddle, and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.